You are Locked On Ole Miss, your daily podcast on the Ole Miss Rebels. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcast, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. Hello, I'm Stephen Willis. I'm from the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, and he is John Macon Gillespie from the Grove Report. And John, this is my last interview I have to do, and I'm on vacation for 8 days starting tomorrow. So if this interview gets weird, that's why.
That's perfectly fine. I understand that fully. It's kind of like, they say when high school seniors enter their senior year, it's kind of like senioritis. They just are ready to kind of get to that point. This is kind of a mini version of that. You know, hitting a vacation for the summer is always a great feeling, and I'm kind of jealous of you, to be honest.
Yeah, this week, Monday through Friday, I'm off. I'll be back next week, and then I'm out again the week of the 4th because we're doing the meet and greet in Madison and all that. So the Locked On Ole Miss podcast, it's the first time I've had any off time since I've been doing this. So since Matt Corral played in the Sugar Bowl, I've pretty much been go.
Well, you kind of deserve it a little bit then. I mean, it's of course, I mean, what we do is fun, but you can still get, you still need some time off occasionally. I mean, that's just kind of how it is with anything. So I am a little jealous of you in that aspect. I think my only vacation will be kind of a work vacation with media days in Dallas in July. So that'll be kind of my only trip this summer.
Listen, I asked Michael Katz this. I had him on now. It's going to air next week whenever it actually airs. But if you're, I guess, an everyday or a member, you can see it now. But how many cowboy hats do you think they will have at SEC Media Days?
Are we counting just media, or are we counting like fans too?
Media, fans, coaches. How big of production is the SEC going to make cowboy hats?
I'd say pretty big, right? I mean, I think it would have to be, because not only is media days taking place in Dallas, but you've got Oklahoma and Texas who, being new to the league, they kind of want to lean into that a little bit, which is pretty obviously why it's in Dallas, I think, this year anyway, but that's just my opinion. Yeah, I mean, I think they'll lean into it pretty hard. And, cowboy hats in the Deep South are kind of a thing too, but they're not near as big as they are, in Texas and that vicinity.
It should be interesting. And I do think, like I said, I don't know what move it is, but there's a meme of they have this like Bradley Cooper and a bunch of guys celebrating. And they did that for when Texas and Oklahoma came into the SEC, and there's one person that's really upset, and they just Texas A&M. That was Louis C.K. in that situation. I think we're going to see the real life version of that, of just Texas A&M pouting for 3 days.
Well, it very well could be, because that football rivalry has been dormant for so long. I guess since Texas A&M came to the SEC, and it does have to feel kind of odd, because let's put it in an Ole Miss perspective. Okay, let's say that Ole Miss had been new to the SEC in 2012, and then a Mississippi State or an LSU or somebody was joining this year. It would feel, you kind of bristle at that a little bit if it had not been the status quo. So I kind of understand that a little bit, but it may be kind of funny to watch too at the same time,
Yeah, I'm going to enjoy it. And also, by the way, we're just randomly talking. It's a Sunday morning for whoever's watching this video, but the Big 12 is going to potentially sell naming rights. And it's rumored to be All-State. It's like the All-State 12 conference or the big All-State conference, however they're going to do it. And that's not a big deal, because the Barclays Premier League has been a thing for 15 years. So naming rights don't freak me out. But somebody on Twitter yesterday won Twitter. And if they're selling naming rights, the Big 12, what if Southwest Airlines gets the naming rights and you have the Southwest Conference?
I think that would be perfect. I mean, I saw that tweet too. And when I saw it, I was like, that is the direction that they need to go, because obviously the Southwest Conference has a lot of nostalgia feel for a lot of people. Really great conference back in its day too, obviously. And so I think that would be huge, kind of funny too. And it's a plug for Southwest Airlines too. which is what they'd be in it for. So
Yeah,
that's the direction I would go, but they don't ask me to make those decisions.
absolutely fantastic. Anyway, we'll get on Ole Miss now. The question that I have for you, John Macon Gillespie, is the Egg Bowl becoming one-sided?
I think it's potentially doing that. Yes, I think this year will tell us a little bit. I mean, on paper coming into the year, I mean we look at it and Ole Miss is the better team than Mississippi State, but that game can play out however each year. I mean, that's just kind of how it is. But I do think right now, yes, it is leaning Ole Miss for sure. What is it? 3 of the last 4 have gone Ole Miss's way, and just the momentum in recruiting, in coaching brand, I think is a big thing. Obviously, Mississippi State's part of that was impacted a little bit by Mike Leach, but I think Ole Miss was ahead in that anyway. I do think it's leaning Ole Miss right now. This thing kind of goes through cycles sometimes, but in this new era of college football, it does appear that Ole Miss has the leg up as far as NIL, things like that. Things that are really going to determine the future of the sport. I think Ole Miss is kind of ahead of the game on that.
So I'm going to give you 2 stats essentially to kind of back up my thought on this one. First of all, Lane Kiffin is going for 4 out of 5. There's been 2 coaches that have won 4 out of 5 in this series. One is Billy Brewer and the other is Johnny Vaught. If you want to talk about complete and total domination of the Mississippi State Bulldogs, those are the 2 coaches that you look at. The other thing that surprises me, do you know Mississippi State has won the game in Starkville 1 time since 2015?
Yeah, that's pretty spectacular, right? I mean, or shocking almost. I mean, because when I was in elementary school, middle school, it was in that time period where the home team won, it seemed like almost every year. I mean, it went through that cycle where if it was in Oxford, Ole Miss was going to get it. If it was in Starkville, State was. I think Ole Miss's last win in Starkville before the 2015 one was 2003, if I'm not mistaken there. It had been a stretch. Eli's senior year was the last one for a little while. So I mean, it's kind of impressive there a little bit that has kind of flipped, and Ole Miss is able to go into Starkville and play not always pristine, but play well enough to win the game and not kind of get bogged down like it had seemed they'd done in the past.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Whenever I was like, my goodness, goes back to Dak pooping his pants all the way the last time that Mississippi State was like a legit threat in that game. Because if you look at the piss and the miss, that was a series of unfortunate events is the reason Ole Miss lost that game. It's not a situation. Mississippi State is really close to losing like 5 straight in Starkville.
Yeah, which if you look at it from a Mississippi State perspective, or really any team, if you get on a streak like that against your rival at home, that's a bad sign in itself, right? Because, I mean, home field advantage should count for something. Even if it is a rivalry game, it should still count for something. And if you wind up on a streak like that, it doesn't bode well for where you kind of are as a program as far as momentum is concerned. And, I mean, maybe I'm reading too much into it, but that's just kind of how I feel about it. I mean, if that streak comes to pass, it's not a great sign for the folks in Starkville.
Yeah, and I mean, what are you gonna do, right? It's a situation to where you have this going on, and you had your program at a place like in 2014, they were number 1 in the country.
Mm-hmm.
And they were absolutely number 1 in the country, ready to go. But they decided at that point, whenever Ole Miss beat Mississippi State in 2014, and nobody will admit to this, but they did it. So, I mean, it has to be true. They decided at that point they would rather burn down Ole Miss's house, even if it meant burning their own. And yes, for 3 years, they burnt down Ole Miss's house, but Ole Miss was able to rebuild. And Mississippi State they're just kind of like, listen, this is a weird thing on Ole Miss's schedule this year. Mississippi State has replaced Vanderbilt.
I guess that is kind of a way of looking at it. I hadn't really made that connection, but I guess that kind of is accurate. And I mean, we don't know what Jeff Lebby's going to be able to do in Starkville. I don't have just lofty expectations for year 1 because it's year 1 and it's his year 1 for sure as a head coach. But yeah, I mean, that is kind of an apt comparison, I guess, as far as SEC opponents go. I mean, I can't really pinpoint another one that would take that place.
Yeah,
Um,
it's weird.
yeah, I mean, it is kind of odd for sure to kind of say that Mississippi State is in that boat, but I can see that for sure. Yeah.
Thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. When we come back, we'll ask John about the new pitching coach in Oxford, Mississippi. We'll also do a little summer vacation and his top 5 Ole Miss head coaches, so stick around for that. Passion, drive, and patience, the formula for winning championships, is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. Superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more. Whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has you covered. And with over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay's guaranteed fit, your parts guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need and the prices you want, it's easy to make your car the MVP and bring home some huge wins. So keep your ride or die alive at ebaymotors.com. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. eBay's guaranteed fit is only available to U.S. customers. Are you watching Fox Sports or ESPN on your TV all day and you have to turn down the volume with all of that shouting? Make the switch to Locked On Sports today. It's a free 24-hour sports streaming channel programmed for you each and every single day to bring you the biggest stories without all of that screaming. Locked On Sports Today brings you can't miss analysis, opinions, and news, streaming 24/7 on YouTube or the free Amazon Fire TV channels app, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every single day. So before we get to the top 5 list, Joel Mangrum, the pitching guru, the head of pitching in the Cleveland Guardians minor league organization, was hired by Ole Miss as its first, I guess, pitching coach, even though Mike Bianco has held that. Joel Mangrum, if anybody watches any baseball whatsoever, you know that the Cleveland Guardians have one of the best pitching organizational structures that are out there. I think this is a home run massive hire for Mike Bianco.
I do too. Looking at his track record, kind of digging, doing some research, and I'm working on a few things that hopefully will be able to pop in the next couple of days. But I think it's a really good hire, and I think this is a move that Ole Miss needed to make as a staff. I think this was really good for Mike too, so that he can be more of a program CEO than he has been, which, I mean, he was always that, but able to focus more on that than having to deal with pitchers and that kind of thing. I think this is really good. I mean, he has a really good coaching pedigree. He's made a lot of stops at the college ranks, and then obviously spent a lot of time with the Guardians, worked some with guys like Doug Nikhazy, Dylan DeLucia, guys like that. So there is kind of a little bit of a connection. If you want to look at what he's been able to do, look at how some of Cleveland's arms have developed, and it should be a really positive thing for Ole Miss because he's obviously played a key role in that.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, I'm okay with Mike Bianco as a pitching coach. I've always been that way. But there's one thing you see. If it was a right-handed pitcher, it was a power arm that was fastball slider. If it was a left-handed pitcher, it was the big looping curveball and the fastball. I mean, that was kind of the thing, and it had gotten a little bit stale. Now, the question is, will Joel Mangrum set it up to where the pitching staff becomes 3-pitch pitchers, to where maybe it's fastball, slider, changeup, or something like that can help them out? Because he's not completely analytically driven. You're going to hear that because that's the way Major League Baseball is at the moment. But he's not completely analytically driven. He will do some normal coaching type stuff that is kind of his secret sauce in developing pitchers.
Yeah, and I think that's a really good thing too. I mean, obviously analytics have a really big place in baseball now, and I think they can be useful for sure. I mean, I think it'd be foolish to say that they're totally useless. But a large part of coaching, I think too, is still that feel, right? I mean, it's not, you can't solely rely on analytics. And so I think that's a really good mix for the college game for sure right now. Because I don't think it's as analytically driven as Major League Baseball, obviously. But it still is to an extent. And I think his college experience paired with what he learned in the professional levels, will be really good in Oxford for sure.
All right, so you're on the hot seat. John Macon Gillespie is going to tell us who the top 5 Ole Miss head football coaches have been in its history. So we're going to start it out with number 5, John.
Number 5, I'm going to go David Cutcliffe. I feel like I'm going to take some heat for this list a little bit, but it's okay. Obviously, Cutcliffe was the guy when Eli was here, had that really good season in 2003. Things kind of ended on a sour note there with I believe it was a 4-7 season in 2004. But I thought he was pretty consistent, I think, for the most part, and had that really good year in 2003. I have him at number 5.
Yes. He missed out on Michael Spurlock for whatever reason. It never clicked at him playing quarterback, and David Cutcliffe have some health concerns, so that contributed to him leaving as well. Number 4.
This is the one I think I'm going to take heat for. I have Hugh Freeze at number 4.
Ooh, okay.
Yeah, so I know obviously there's a lot of issue with how the program essentially disintegrated towards the end of his tenure. But if we look at his own field production outside of that last season, Ole Miss reached some really high highs in that span. They had some head scratching losses too, but they reached some really high points. The Sugar Bowl, being ranked in the first college football playoff rankings, things of that nature. I debated not putting him on the list, but I thought those highs by themselves, I felt like he needed to be included somewhere, even with the NCAA and all the collapse that happened there towards the end.
Yeah, and that win over Alabama, not even the Sugar Bowl, but the win over Alabama probably gets him a little bit of leeway, I think. Number 3.
Yeah, I've got Billy Brewer, number 3. Obviously, I think his career was before my time. I will say that. I'm dating myself a little bit, but you kind of mentioned it a second ago. His domination against Mississippi State is a testament to what he was able to do. He still hung around Oxford a lot. I mean, I would see him occasionally in the press box even before he passed. He was kind of a fixture there, and I think what he was able to do, his longevity there was good enough to have him the number 3 spot.
Yeah, when I was the video coordinator at Ole Miss, and we'd be out filming practice and whatever, and you would be going around, Billy Brewer would be walking through Vaught-Hemingway Stadium. He was doing stairs up and down, up and down. You would see him nearly every day. He was just a fixture around Oxford.
Yeah, for sure.
Number 3, number 2.
2. Lane Kiffin at number 2.
Okay.
I think that he has an opportunity, if he stays at Ole Miss long enough, to have an argument for number 1, depending on what he's able to do over these next few years. But I think having an 11-win season, he's been to 2 Access Bowls, he's won one of them, and the current momentum where most analysts expect Ole Miss to be in the running for a college football playoff berth, if not in the playoff. I think that's a really big testament to what he's been able to do, especially on the heels of the aforementioned Hugh Freeze collapse. I have him at number 2.
Yeah, it should be interesting. And like Keon Howard, I think that's his name. Kobe Howard, the wide receiver out of Chaminade Madonna. If I got your name wrong, I apologize real quick. I'm just trying to pull it off the top of my head. But he's being shown around campus during his official visit by Austin Simmons. So Austin Simmons is kind of becoming that next quarterback for Ole Miss. And with players like Caleb Cunningham and Jerome Miles and Deuce Knight, Kylan Deere potentially in that group, this 2025 class could be 2013-esque in what they could do.
Yeah, it's pretty crazy to make that comparison, because obviously we know what the 13 class did, what they were capable of, and I think they were capable of more than what they actually accomplished. I mean, obviously some things kind of got in the way there, but that was a huge moment where Ole Miss kind of seemed to arrive a little bit. And so, I think that's an apt comparison for sure.
All right, number 1.
Johnny Vaught has to be number 1. Obviously, the stadium isn't partially named after him. What he was able to accomplish at Ole Miss has not really been paralleled, even though it was decades ago. He's really just a legend on campus and in the coaching community. I believe he's in the College Football Hall of Fame. So, I mean, he's got that national level of prominence and was able to do things at Ole Miss that no one else has been able to. He's got claim to 3 national championships, I believe all 6 SEC championships maybe came under him. Just it hasn't been matched yet, and I think that's going to stand, for at least a little while longer.
Yeah, and what you have, if you want a comparison of what's going on in modern football at Ole Miss, Johnny Vaught had a really good run of about 1957 to 1963. There was about a 6-7 year run to where he was potentially the best program in all of college football. Lane Kiffin is about to where 1956, getting ready to go on one of those runs. Maybe that first run was that first year. So this one's just starting. So we'll see exactly what Lane's able to put together, because it is getting close to that run. Now, it's always obviously in college football season, or in college football, you never know exactly how big of a run or how long it's going to last, because it could end in an instant. But if you just look at longevity, if he stays, this is at the beginning of potentially like one of those 6-year type runs.
Yeah, and I think there are more variables at play now than there were then, but it seems like he's navigated those variables pretty well to this point. And with if this team is able to do what we think they're capable of doing, I think this could be the beginning of that for sure.
So what are your summer vacation plans? I know you talked about a work trip or something.
Media days. I'm thinking about taking a trip down to Natchez, Mississippi. I don't think I'm going to go far off, really. But Natchez is about 4 or 5 hours from me in North Mississippi. I've always wanted to go there, never have. I like historic homes and buildings and stuff because I'm a nerd. Outside of that, I'm not really sure. Sometimes my family, I'd get up with them and we'd go to the Smoky Mountains, but I don't think that's really in the cards this year. So, we'll see. But those 2 things are for sure on my radar.
Yeah, next week we have the family coming down, and we're going to go do all the Disney stuff and the Legoland stuff and all of that of being in Central Florida. And then whenever the 4th of July weekend comes up, the 3rd, I'm going up for my mom's birthday, but we're going to do a meet and greet on the 2nd at 7:00 at Walk-Ons. But that'll be another vacation to where I'm actually in Mississippi that week.
Yeah.
So
it's fun. I really like this time of year, even if I don't get to go far off somewhere. I mean, I like to me, this is kind of like taking a breath a little bit this time of year. So
thanks again for making the Locked On Ole Miss podcast your first listen every day. We're free and available wherever you get your podcasts, including YouTube. We're part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every single day. John Macon, what do you got going on over at the Grove Report?
Well, obviously this is still kind of a recruiting season type thing. We're going to be covering some of that. Continue to look ahead to football season. That's really what most of the meat of things are right now, is that. And I may have a couple of baseball things that pop on this pitching coach hire, kind of more in depth over the next week or so. I'm kind of working on that as we speak. So we'll see kind of how that fleshes out as well.
That should be pretty cool. Anyway, John Macon, I will see you. Well, I guess in 2 weeks. I won't see you next week. So take care, bud. And if you need anything, let me know.
All right. Thank you. Have a good week.
All right, you too.